Okay, I'll really quickly introduce Jerri. She has served on the board for the Fulbright Alumni Association, the Berkeley Town and Gown Club, the Berkeley Architectural Heritage Association, and chaired the American Institute of Architects Historical Resources Committee, San Francisco chapter, for over 10 years. Currently, she is the chair for the Alameda Architectural Preservation Society's Award Committee. And as a Fulbright scholar, she conducted research at the Architecture School in Oslo, Norway, which culminated in her book, Norwegian Wood, A Tradition of Building. She has been inaugurated into the Who's Who in American Women and Who's Who in Professional Women, and her projects are frequently exhibited in Small Firms Great Projects, sponsored by the American Institute of Architects. Jerri.
This is this way, forward, back, okay. Okay, so we're going to take a look at a building that many of you here are very familiar with. Back in the early 90s, I was the chair of the AI Historic Resources Committee, and I was the representative to work with the California Building Standards Commission, who were upgrading the California State Historic Building Code. So when I started practicing architecture, this is what I was using. It was the California State Building Code, this 1990 version. And so about mid-90s, we were working statewide with professionals from all over the state to get a more modern version of this. At about the same time, the First Church of Christ Scientists in Oakland was doing a seismic upgrade. And as many of our speakers alluded to today, their seismic upgrade was about $100,000. There was a threshold at that time that if you spent over $63,000 on a project, you had to spend 20% of your construction budget on handicap improvements. And as alluded to by another previous speaker, you don't get to pick what you want to do. They give you in order of preference what you have to do. Number one, you have to get in the front door. Number two, you need a path to travel. Number three, you need toilets. Well, the church had done the toilets about 5 years before, but they'd never gotten anybody into the church, a ramp into the church. So they went down to the city and said, well, we really have it's on the National Register. Oh, I'm sorry, I have a handout on the churches that I'll pass out later that gives you the date, the architect, the pink lava stone, the beautiful stained glass windows. And so they went down to the state to say that they couldn't really modify their architectural treasure. It would be very difficult for them to do that. Plus, it was a financial hardship. This is a church. They did all the fundraising themselves to do the seismic improvements, and it took them about 10 years to raise the money. This is the interior of the church, standing up in the balcony, which I have been told is moved. It's very famous for its stained glass windows. This is the main one. This is a skylight in the church, so it's a very, very wonderful interior. And so is there a red? Okay. So they went to the site with the building official, and this is the main entry of the church. And the building official agreed. They said you'd be in the public right away, and no, you probably shouldn't put the handicap ramp right away, handicap ramp right there. However, you can still fit one over here. So there's the main entry, and there's the second entry. And so they still were not happy with this, and so they called the office, SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, and they said, well, you need to talk to Jerri. She's been working with the Building Commission. She's in your area. She knows the code. She'll be able to work with the building officials. And so I came out and, of course, documented the fact that not only is it a difficult stairway, there are historic finishes, there's this original wrought iron work, original tile work, etc. And as I walked around the site on the, I'm going to call this the south side of the building, there is, hang on, backward. There we go. There is this secondary entrance which leads right into the sanctuary area. So I propose that we use this for the location of the of the door, and the building official said, that I went down there with the pictures and said, here's the state historic building code. By this time, I was using the 1998 building code, which had been published by that time. The building official said, we don't use the state historic building code in Oakland. I said, but you are in the state of California, and this is your code. And so they directed me to the supervisor, Mr. Chu, who ended up being a fairly reasonable guy. And he said, okay, you're right. It's the code. We'll let you use it. I'm going the wrong way. And so and we did, but not with very much ease. He still made me go to the Handicap Appeals Board. I had a public hearing, had to go in front of all these people in wheelchairs saying, we don't want to destroy our beautiful church. We want to save the things, and we want to put you in the secondary entrance. And there was still some resistance at that point, but they did, with the photographs, understand what we were trying to achieve. So I got that hurdle done. And then the city of Oakland made us get some very expensive encroachment permits because, of course, we're building a ramp on their sidewalk. So we got those, and we built it. And I think the church probably spent, I'm going to say, $25,000 to $30,000 on this, which they hadn't planned on spending. So. And there you have the final result, which is what it looked like in about 2000 when it was completed. The kind of silver lining of this whole story is that and I, of course, started attending their annual Christmas concerts. I was becoming a regular. I'd been working with them for 2 or 3 years on the project. And they were, I'd say half the, sanctuary was filled. It wasn't very crowded. The second year that this ramp was installed, I arrived at the Christmas concert, and there was a line around the block with people pushing their aunts, their uncles, their moms, their dads, their children. I mean, everybody could now get into the free community Christmas concert. It's a beautiful concert. As you saw, the organ is just fabulous. So the silver lining was they spent money that they didn't want, but they actually got the building to be more of a community asset. People could come and experience it, and they could share it with more. So it was a wonderful, wonderful thing. Fast forward, here we are in 2013 and 14, and I think the building's been on the real estate. It was put up for sale in 13 or 14, Betty, do you remember? I don't remember. Anyway, it was put up for sale. The congregation had really gotten too small to be able to maintain. It's a beautiful Romanesque building. As you can see, the roofing expenses every year from leaks and repairs was horrendous, and they just couldn't keep it up. So they put it for sale, tried to find another church. No one came forward. They tried to look at performing spaces. No one came forward. And so finally a fellow from San Francisco who owned a clothing retail store, very famous, Jerri Clothing, I'm not familiar with it, purchased the property with the idea of consolidating his retail. And Betty knows more about this part of it than I do because I was not involved in it, consolidating his retail business at this site. I thought it was a little bit of a difficult marriage because with retail, you typically want a lot of glass and visibility. There's none in this. This is very Romanesque. This is very stained glass, very heavy wooden doors. The one plan I thought, I don't know what came to you, Betty, with, but they were wanting to take the old wooden doors off. And I kept trying to explain, this is on the National Register. You can't affect the facade. Anyway, so I'm not sure, but what I have heard through the board members of the church is that he's finally given up on his plans. And I went back out there in between raindrops for slides here. It's all there, but you can see there's a sign on the front right here that's the building's for lease. So if anybody needs a church to lease, there's a beautiful one that's been seismically reinforced. And so it's still there, it's still beautiful, and it still has its front entry. And so that is the end of the story. With the postscript is that when I went back 2 years later with the Rockridge Masonic Lodge had a similar, they had a little 6-inch entry landing coming out their front door. They put the elevator in, but there was no access through the front door because you had to go through the 6-inch barrier. They ended up contacting me, and I called him Mr. Chu. I said, Mr. Chu, I need to use the state historic building code again. And he approved it without going through the handicap accessibility rules. I still had to go through all the applications and write, my findings and everything. And I think my fees were like $5,000 and the ramp cost $2,000. But anyway, it's accessible. We didn't have to destroy the facade. So any questions? And who wants to walk over there? Okay. Great.
You just want to walk over there. Okay.
Questions?
I just want to walk over there.
That's fine. We'll all walk over there, whoever goes with us. And I can give you some information.